Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Re-Federalist Report, where we look at all kinds of constitutional issues and with an eye on the original intent of the founders. I am Brady, also known as the War Hamster. My co-host is Douglas B. Gibbs, my constitutional mentor and very good friend, Mr. Constitution himself. Hi, Doug.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Always a pleasure. We are going to continue our walk through Madison's notes of the Philadelphia Convention. Why are we doing this, Doug?
Because if you want to fully understand originalism, the original intent of the United States Constitution, what better way to do so than to go straight to the debates? And of course, there's other documents that help you understand it, ratification debates, the Federalist Papers, a lot. But the real, true nitty gritty of understanding what they meant is to go to those discussions, those arguments during that 4.5 months during the hot summer of 1787.
Very good. We left off last episode. They were debating the various merits of the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan for how they should amend their Articles of Confederation.
They're all in agreement. The Virginia plan was the first foundation. It was the first one presented. So it's not a matter of, it's this or that. It was the Virginia plan, and now everybody's going, well, wait a second. There might be some elements that we want to change it. So other plans, in particular here, the New Jersey plan is coming in to dispute what has been discussed all along.
Okay, well, let's jump into it. It's interesting. I'm on Twitter, I guess not all that much, but a little bit. And there's a gentleman there by the name of Jose Vega. This is his X-File. I've been following Jose for whatever reason for a while, I guess, because he pops up in my feed. I like what he has to say. If you look at his profile, he's running he's a candidate for New York 15, and he's worth checking out if you're in New York. He's an interesting guy. But in his profile, he says straight up LaRouche. And of course, he's referring to Lyndon LaRouche, who is a economist. I think Doug and I would agree with maybe 95+% of the time. But the LaRouchians are big fans of Hamilton. And I just texted back to Jose yesterday or tweeted back to him. I go, hey, you're better than any other candidate in New York. I'd vote for you. But can you knock it off? Can you, LaRouche's, knock it off with a Hamiltonian love? He responds, because that's pretty funny. Exactly why do you say that? And I gave him a big 3 or 4 paragraph synopsis of why I dislike Hamilton. And I bring that up. And by the way, Jose is, and I have agreed he's going to come on my channel next week just to debate that exact topic. So we're not going to go into it here. But I thought that was pretty neat because the star of today's show is going to be Alexander Hamilton.
And let me lay something out real quick. So those historians who appreciate Hamilton are firm believers that if Hamilton's economic foundation had not been established, America would not have been able to compete on the world stage. What Hamilton did or tried to do is connect us to Europe monetarily and in other ways. This is a guy who believes that in a world of empires, the way to compete is to be just like the other empires. You have to rise to their level as an empire. And the rest of the founding fathers may not necessarily be in that full agreement of that.
Yeah, and just as an aside, the argument is that Hamilton created what's known as the American system, loaded up on debt and basically a mercantilist system, full of tax-funded internal improvements and federally funded internal improvements and protective tariffs. And they're right that the American
tariffs. We don't mean protective of America. We mean protective of certain industries and certain players in those industries.
Yes, exactly. And it's crony capitalism is what it is. In a nutshell, they make the case that this American system created the greatest economy in the world. And that's true. But our argument is that we've never had a free and fair market without government interference. Has never been tried because Hamilton's the guy who sabotaged that. So without further ado, let's jump in. So we are now on Monday, June 18th. Madison's debates, June 18th. In the Committee of the Whole on the propositions of Mr. Patterson of New Jersey and Mr. Randolph of Virginia.
Yeah, remember, for
On
those
motion
of
of
you
Mr.
who missed earlier shows, Virginia Plan was written by James Madison, but Mr. Randolph, who is, by the way, Thomas Jefferson's cousin, was the one that was tasked with presenting the Virginia Plan to the convention.
Very good. On the ocean of Mr. Dickinson to postpone the first resolution in Mr. Patterson's plan in order to take up the following: that the Articles of Confederation ought to be revised and amended so as to render the government of the United States adequate to the exigencies, the preservation and the prosperity of the Union. The postponement was agreed to by 10 states, Pennsylvania divided. Doug, I need to go off camera for about 10 seconds and take my Invisalign out because it's causing me to not speak as clearly. So if you can fill some dead space while I do that, I'll be right back.
So Mr. Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, who's going to be the crux of today's discussion, is wordy. He has no problem saying what he believes, but at the same time, he understands that a lot of what he believes may not necessarily be popular. So he's also a master at wordsmithing. In other words, saying the truth, but in such a manner that you're not really sure that's what he said. So as we go through this today, you're going to see some of that. He was also very good at that in his Federalist papers. He was known to be a nationalist, big government-minded guy, but he had to present it in a way that it didn't come out exactly like that. So as we go through today, just pay attention to the language, because he wordsmiths very well, and he's very good at telling you one thing while making you feel like he's actually a little bit on the moderate side.
I'm just going to do a quick background of Hamilton. We're not going to do a full life story of him because it's going to take up the entire show, but I just wanted to give the background of him. He's born in either 1755 or 57 in a place called Nevis Island. Interesting side note, I once upon a time managed the money of the Bank of Nevis Island, and a wealthy investor had a big home there. I was going to be able to vacation there about every 6 months, but the bank got into some internal struggles and we had to back away from that. But so never have visited the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton, but I almost did.
Yeah, and even though he was, understand, folks, even though he's born in Nevis Island is part of the British Empire, part of the British colony system. And we'll get to this, but when he moved to America, he loves America. He's a patriot. He loves this country, and he does a lot for it, especially during the Revolutionary era, which we're going to go over. But he's got other ideas when it comes to what it should be in this world of empires. Continue.
Yeah, so he's born an orphan, taken in by a wealthy merchant, brings him to New York, goes to King's College, which is Columbia University. It says, despite his young age, he was an anonymous but prolific and widely read pamphleteer and advocate for the American Revolution. As Doug said, he's a patriot. Serves as an artillery officer, and then he was the aide-de-camp for George Washington for 4 years.
And understand, because of that, George Washington comes to the point where he really trusts him. There's a deep trust there. Maybe a little bit misplaced a little, but there's a deep trust.
Yeah, so that's his background. And let's just see what he has to say. Now, he's been pretty quiet in this convention so far.
And understand, too, we're getting ready to see a real shakeup when it comes to the New York delegates. That's coming soon. But and I wonder if all this talking he's doing helps make John Lansing and Robert Yates decide to fly the coop. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, so this whole day we're going to be talking a very long paragraph of Hamilton. All right, there aren't a whole lot of natural breaks. In fact, there are none. So we're going to try to space this out. Doug, you can interject anytime you got something to say. I'll
Yes,
keep
sir.
an ear out for it. Mr. Hamilton had been hitherto silent on the business before the convention, partly from respect to others whose superior abilities in age and experience rendered him unwilling to bring forward issues dissimilar to theirs, and partly from his delicate situation with respect to his own state. That's what Doug just referred to. And we'll get into that a little bit more. To whose sentiments, as expressed by his colleagues, he could by no means accede. The crisis, however, which now marked our affairs, were too serious to permit any scruples whatever to prevail over the duty imposed on every man to contribute his efforts for the public safety and happiness. Hamilton saying, well, I wasn't going to speak because I'm young and inexperienced, but now I feel obliged. He was obliged, therefore, to declare himself unfriendly to both plans. He was particularly opposed to that from New Jersey, the New Jersey plan being the one that's much closer to federalism, whereas the Virginia plan was for a stronger national government. And so Hamilton's letting it know right now that he wants bigger government. Being fully convinced that no amendment of the Confederation leaving the states in possession of their sovereignty could possibly answer the purpose. That's a big one right there. He is saying he wants the states to give up their sovereignty altogether.
At one point, he is going to declare that they should be corporations, meaning nothing more than provinces.
Yes. So now you know where Hamilton comes from. And now you understand why Doug and I aren't big fans.
Right.
We could just stop right there, but let's just get some more interesting things.
Yeah. Well,
On the other hand,
and understand right now, this is just Madison describing Hamilton a little bit. We haven't actually gotten into Hamilton's actual words yet. Go ahead.
On the other hand, he confessed he was much discouraged by the amazing extent of country in expecting the desired blessings from any general sovereignty that could be substituted. As to the powers of the convention, he thought the doubts stated on that subject had arisen from distinctions and reasonings too subtle. They had previously debated whether they even have the authority to present some of the things they're doing here at the convention. Some of the people thought that, and others said,
and we have to also remember that idea there, the questioning of that. Hamilton was the loudest voice during the Annapolis convention nearly a year before, calling for this convention. He's not going to back down and say, oh, I was wrong. He's all about, no, we got to do something here. We need something new. Excuse me. He does not admit yet that he wants a new constitution. He's still toying around with this idea that we're trying to fix the articles. But if ever there's anybody who indicates that we need a new system, it's him.
A federal government he conceived to mean an association of independent communities into one. No more states, we're one nation. It's kind of what we ended up getting.
Ultimately,
different confederacies have different powers and exercise them in different ways. In some instances, the powers are exercised over collective bodies, and others over individuals, as in the German Diet, and among ourselves in cases of piracy. Great latitude, therefore, must be given to the signification of the term. The plan last proposed, that's the New Jersey, departs itself from the federal idea, as understood by some, since it is to operate eventually on individuals. The nitty-gritty is getting there is, do the people have the power or do the states have the power? He agreed, moreover, with the honorable gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Randolph, that we owed it to our country to do on this emergency whatever we should deem essential to its happiness. Means we should not have limits in what we talk about.
Everything's on the table.
Because he wants stuff that isn't on the table. The states sent us here to provide for the exigencies of the Union. Exigencies? Am I saying that right? Jeez.
Exigencies.
It's not a word you use very often today.
Or exigencies, but it's an uncommon word in today's vernacular for sure.
I think it's spelled differently today. That's why I'm having trouble with it. To rely on and propose any plan not adequate to these exigencies. Stop using that word, Hamilton. Merely because it was not clearly within our powers, would be to sacrifice the means to the end. Oh, goodness, that's a communist. Communists always believe the ends justify the means, and so does Hamilton. I mean, he's just giving it away right there,
Yeah, and like I said, he's very poetic on how he does it, and apparently he likes certain words a lot.
Once it may be said that the states cannot ratify a plan not within the purview of the Article of Confederation, providing for alterations and amendments. But may not the states themselves, in which no constitutional authority equal to this purpose exists in the legislatures, have had in view a reference to the people at large? In the Senate of New York, a proviso was moved that no act of the convention should be binding until it should be referred to the people and ratified. That's one of the issues. Okay, and the motion was lost by a single voice only. The reason assigned against it being that it might possibly be found an inconvenient shackle.
And remember, the discussions all along have been, well, the states will never ratify this. People will never ratify if we do this or do that. And he's questioning whether or not there even should be ratification. But it's interesting, too, referred to the people and ratified. So,
Yeah,
it's a question. Does it go to the state legislatures? Does it go to the people? What we wind up with, by the way, is an interesting hybrid. But anyway, continue.
In Article 7, it basically says the states ratified it.
Right.
And the people are represented indirectly through those conventions in the states.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the hybrid Doug's talking about. Again, it's also the question of direct, trying to avoid direct democracy.
Right.
The great question is, what provision shall we make for the happiness of the country? He's going to get really long-winded here, so I'll go quick. He would first make a comparative examination of the two plans, prove that there were essential defects in both, and point out such changes as might render a national one efficacious.
Close enough.
The great and essential principles necessary for the support of government are: 1, an active and constant interest in supporting it. This principle does not exist in the states in favor of the federal government. They have evidently, in a high degree, the esprit de corps. They constantly pursue internal interests adverse to those of the whole. They have their particular debts, their particular plans of finance, etc. All these, when opposed to, invariably prevail over the requisitions and plans of Congress.
Okay, now let's notice something here. His first attack when it comes to the ability of this country to be efficacious is that, don't you love his language? Go straight to the money. He hits the finance first. He's not shy about that. That's his aim.
Yeah, which is interesting because he did not have a finance background.
No,
but we'll get more into his
and understand. He's made friends with some very interesting people like Robert Morris, and so ultimately that's going to lead to his rise in the finance world with no finance experience, but his poetic language regarding finances during this convention and otherwise convinces everybody he must be an expert.
Okay, the next principle, number 2, the love of power. Men love power. The same remarks are applicable to this principle. The states have constantly shewn a disposition rather to regain the powers delegated by them than to part with more, or to give effect to what they had parted with. The ambitions of their demagogues is known to hate the control of the general government.
Do you realize, folks, what he just said there? We have a danger of the states wanting too much power, so we need a strong central power to control that power. He has done what most leftists do, is they turns the argument right back. It's projection and then some. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, it's really simple. We have the axiom is power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. And he's correct in what he's saying. Essentially, he's using truth though he's using elements of truth to get to his big lie, which is centralized power is better than all these demagogues of state at the state level fighting for power.
And the way I would say it is centralized corruption is more powerful than decentralized corruption.
But don't worry, you can trust us with these with centralized power, is basically his attitude. But you got to remember also he comes from an old school line of thinking that the people are uninformed and it really takes an elite to run anything.
It may be remarked too that the citizens have not that anxiety to prevent a dissolution of the general government. When he says general government, he's talking about the central government. We call it the federal government today.
Mm-hmm.
As of the particular governments, a dissolution of the latter would be fatal. Of the former would still leave the purposes of government attainable to a considerable degree. It means you can dissolve the states, but not the general government. Consider what such a state as Virginia will be in a few years, a few compared with the life of nations. How strongly will it feel its importance and self-sufficiency? Okay, point number 3.
He's playing on the fears of those who think that Virginia's going to get out of control. So don't worry, if we have a big central government, Virginia can be controlled.
And those are very real fears that have already been expressed by the smaller states.
And once again, what he's talking about uses a lot of elements of truth. A lot of what he's saying is true. However, the solution may not necessarily be the right one.
3, as an habitual attachment to the people. The whole force of this tie is on the side of state government. Its sovereignty is immediately before the eyes of the people. Its protection is immediately enjoyed by them. From its hand, distributive justice, nice word, and all those acts which familiarize and endear government to a people are dispensed to them. What's he saying there?
Closer government is to the people, the more closely they are to it, the more they feel that they have control. There's more force of the people's for the people. But if you listen to this and you read carefully, while he's talking about the people, it kind of out of the other side of his mouth, he's saying that, yeah, but the voice of the people is dangerous. The habitual attachment of the people. And so we'll keep going here, but just understand he has very little faith in popular choice. Now, that said, he's right in the sense that pure democracy is dangerous, but he wants to eliminate any forms of the voice of the people.
All right, this was a big one. Point number 4 he's making is force by which may be understood a coercion of laws or a coercion of arms. Congress have not the former except in a few cases. In particular states, this coercion is nearly sufficient, though he, don't know what this word's supposed to be, held it in the most cases, but not entirely so. A certain portion of military force is absolutely necessary in large communities. Massachusetts is now feeling this necessity and making provision for it. Stop right there. This is one of the big central arguments is, whether the states should have militias, to protect themselves from a general government. He's kind of arguing against it, but he's pointing out that Massachusetts and Shays' rebellion shows that they actually need a military force, absolutely necessary.
But who's going to control this military force? He asks.
But how can this force be exerted on the states collectively? It is impossible. It amounts to a war between the parties. Foreign powers also will not be idle spectators. They will interpose, the confusion will increase, and a dissolution of the Union ensue.
And what he's saying here is that the rest of the world can't wait to gobble us up. The rest of the world wants to influence us. And once again, this is true. There's truth there. But then the way to meet that force is with force. Once again, partly true, but watch where he's going with it. Continue.
He's also saying, if we don't have a central force, the states will just scatter, they'll go their different ways with their different factions.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't trust state sovereignty at all. And he doesn't trust that because you got to remember, and I've said this in my classes, as colonies and as new states, the states bickered like siblings. They fought over everything. Hamilton saw that as a recipe for disaster. I see it.
Yeah.
I've always seen it as healthy. Debate is healthy. Debate equals liberty. The states become their own laboratories, and and the other ones get to watch. That's good? That's bad. But we'll see where he goes with this. But once again, he sees state sovereignty, and he sees any popular force at all by the population, by the individuals, anything that even resembles democracy whatsoever, as completely dangerous. I agree, pure democracy is dangerous, but the people also have to have their voice. And he say, no, any voice at all is dangerous. And if we allow the states to be sovereign, it's dangerous also.
Number 5, influence. He did not mean corruption, but a dispensation of those regular honors and emoluments which produce an attachment to the government. Almost all the weight of these is on the side of the states, and must continue so as long as the states continue to exist. He is talking about corruption. Says he's not, but he is. All the passions then we see of avarice, ambition, interest, which govern most individuals and all public bodies, fall into the current of the states and do not flow into the stream of the general government. The former, therefore, will generally be an overmatch for the general government and render any confederacy in its very nature precarious. It's an interesting argument he makes there.
Yeah, the battle for power can never allow a government of a union to exist.
Yeah, he's saying the states, it's not corruption, but it is, and that will basically they'll override the general government unless you give the general government more teeth.
And he's kind of also, without saying it directly, playing into what Madison had originally said about giving the central government, through its legislature, the ability to negative what the states do, negative state laws and all that. But as Hamilton's presenting his argument, Madison's going to school. He's paying attention to this. He's paying attention to his past conversations with people like Thomas Jefferson. And in about the next 3 to 4 weeks, responses from Jefferson in France are going to start coming in. So we're watching right now. Hamilton and Madison are more or less in agreement, and Hamilton's playing on that. It's going to get interesting later on when Madison starts to disagree with Hamilton. But anyway, continue, please.
All right, Hamilton's about to jump into a history lesson, so I'm going to go through it really quick. I don't think we need to. Because theory is in this case fully confirmed by experience. The Amphictyonic Council would seem ample powers for general purposes. It had in particular the power of fining and using force against delinquent members. What was the consequence? Their decrees were mere signals of war. The Phocian War is a striking example of it. Philip, at length, taking advantage of their disunion and insinuating himself into their councils, made himself master of their fortunes. The German Confederacy affords another lesson. The authority of Charlemagne seemed to be as great as could be necessary. The great feudal chiefs, however, exercising their local sovereignties, soon felt the spirit and found the means of encroachments, which reduced the imperial authority to a nominal sovereignty. The Diet has succeeded, which, though aided by a prince at its head, of great authority independently of its imperial attributes, is a striking illustration of the weakness of confederated governments. So what's he saying so far here?
He's saying the Articles of Confederation is going to be a failure because it's Confederacy A. B, he's using a technique that is common even today. It's either this or it's that. So if it's a confederacy and the states have sovereignty, it's going to It's going to die. It's going to pass Confederacy. Show it. Therefore, you must have the opposite extreme. You must have a strong central government. He can't. He's not at this moment anyway, and if ever, not capable of seeing that there is a compromise between the two.
Well, he's capable of it because he would end up arguing in the Federalist Papers for exactly what was ratified, which was a confederacy, knowing that once we got that in power, he was creating a stronger central government, and then he would go outside of what was agreed upon immediately
and start bumping it in the direction he wants it.
Other examples instruct us in the same truth. The Swiss cantons have scarce any union at all, and have been more than once at war with one another. How then are all these evils to be avoided? Only by such a complete sovereignty in the general government, as will turn all the strong principles and passions above mentioned on its side.
Once again, he's advocating for eliminating state sovereignty.
Otherwise, they'll kill each other. Does the scheme of New Jersey produce this effect? Does it afford any substantial remedy, whatever? On the contrary, it labors under great defects, and the defect of some of its provision will destroy the efficacy of others. It gives direct revenue to Congress, but this will not be sufficient. The balance can only be supplied by requisitions, which experience proves cannot be relied upon. So that's important. He's suggesting that we need more revenue than the proposed plan for New Jersey would give the general government. Remember, they're not given the power of direct taxation. They basically have the ability to have tariffs of about 5% on imported goods. And then the states, they have to requisition the states for any more money. His vision is to have the government, doing, federally funded internal improvements that help out his buddies. So that requires more money, a bigger taxing power he wants for the central government. It is essential for him to carry out what he wants.
And again, there's an element of truth there in the sense that one of the failures, one of the weaknesses of the Article of Confederation was that it could not tax, and because it could not tax, its money was completely worthless. It was unable to bring together a unarmed force because you can't tax to fund it in the first place. So he's essentially right, but once again, he's not recognizing that there could be any balance there. It's either you're either a confederacy with no power, or you have a central system with all power. It's got to be one or the other in his argument.
And the problem with his argument is it's a slippery slope. Once you start expanding the power of the central government, it's going to keep on grabbing until you get to where we are today.
Yeah, well, it's the natural pushing of the envelope, as I like to call it. The envelope always needs to get pushed just a little bit more, just a little bit more. We do this naturally. Our human nature does this naturally. That's also the reason why you see certain things, other things, maybe societal, cultural issues also get worse and worse and worse because we're constantly pushing the envelope.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The founding fathers, jumping ahead, would give us one tool to pull that back periodically, and it was called the Article 5, which we'll get to, but an Article 5 convention where the states assemble and basically can propose amendments to the Constitution to ensure that the federal government has not gotten out of line. Sadly, Doug,
valuable tool that's never been exercised.
Exactly. If the states are to deliberate on the mode, they will also deliberate on the object of the supplies, and will grant or not grant as they approve or disapprove of it. You want our money? You got to spend it on what we want you to.
Right. Exactly. And the problem is
the delinquency of one will invite and countenance it in others. Quotas too must in the nature of things be so unequal as to produce the same evil. To what standard will you resort? Land is a fallacious one. Compare Holland with Russia, France or England with other countries of Europe, Pennsylvania with North Carolina. Will the relative pecuniary abilities of those instances correspond with the relative value of land? So if you apportion taxes based on land, there's different population densities. So that's not effective. Take number of inhabitants, population based for tax. for the rule and make like comparison of different countries, and you will find it to be equally unjust. The different degrees of industry and improvement in different countries render the first object a precarious measure of wealth. Just because you're more populated doesn't mean you're more prosperous. That's what he's saying. So you can't have a population-based taxation. Much depends too on situation. Connecticut, New Jersey, and North Carolina, not being commercial states and contributing to the wealth of the commercial ones, can never bear quotas assessed by the ordinary rules of proportion. They will and must fail in their duty. Their example will be followed and the union itself be dissolved. Because they can't afford the bills.
If it isn't industry, we're in trouble. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with being industrious, but let's continue. Yeah. Now, and remember, his Federalist Party that he will create later during Washington's presidency. The greatest support for that party will be in the quote unquote industrious states, the Northeast, the far north, the Massachusetts, Connecticut, the New England area, and all of that, and New York. That'll be the hub of where the Federalist Party power comes from.
Yeah, that's a really important historical point because we really had our two different economies. You had the agrarian South and the industrial North, and industrial and banking North. Now, the northern states, New England states, were the first to talk about secession as soon as 1794, which 7 years after this convention. They realized that the way the states had been, the way the power of the government had been split up, they didn't get the industrial economy that they wanted. The southern agrarian states had too much say in what the North did. That difference right there is exactly what led us to this tariff of abominations, eventually to the quote Civil War. And Hamilton's showing what side he's on of that immediately. Whence then is the national revenue to be drawn? Cares a lot about money, doesn't he?
Sure does.
From commerce? Even from exports, which notwithstanding the common opinion are fit objects of moderate taxation, from excise, etc. Those, though not equal, are less unequal than quotas. Now he's getting into the concept of tariffs. And that becomes a big topic over the next 100 years. Another destructive ingredient in the plan, talking about New Jersey, is that equality of suffrage, which is so much desired by the small states. It is not in human nature that Virginia and the large states should consent to it, or if they did, that they should long abide by it. Once again, protecting the big states from the small and the small states from the big. He's saying if you give equal sovereignty, the big states eventually will say no more. It shocks too much the ideas of justice and every human feeling. Bad principles in a government, though slow, are sure in their operation and will gradually destroy it.
He's arguing for majority rule. Basically. While he claims to hate democracy, that's really what he's calling for.
Yeah, he wants one great central government, and then the states can't bicker as well. And he's trying to demonstrate
with one great government, the bigger states would have the larger voice.
Well, the more populous, yes, but they would no longer consider themselves states. They'd consider
they'd just be the population centers, which are the ones who typically vote for the ideas that he wants.
Mm-hmm. A doubt has been raised whether Congress at present have a right to keep ships or troops in times of peace. He leans to the negative. Mr. Patterson's plan provides no remedy. If the powers proposed were adequate, the organization of Congress is such that they could never be properly and effectually exercised. The members of Congress being chosen by the states and subject to recall represent all the local prejudices. Should the powers be found effectual, they will from time to time be heaped on them till a tyrannic sway shall be established. Interesting. The general power, whatever be its form, if it preserves itself, must swallow up the state powers.
There he is again.
Otherwise, it will be
State
swallowed.
sovereignty.
Yeah. Otherwise, it will be swallowed up by them.
For him, in his mind, it's a battle for power. Either the states, who always bicker and can't decide upon anything, will take all the power, or the central government, who will hold us together and keep us united, will need to have all the power. That's essentially what he.
And what you'd find is he served in Washington's cabinet, him and a lot of little Federalist buddy cronies. They basically are running the government, an administrative government, and kind of ignoring Congress on many issues. And this is reflected here.
And that Hamiltonian viewpoint that he's given us right here still exists today. And if anything, it's now on steroids. And I want to give an example real quick. There's a movie, a National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage, and the second one, which deals with the Mount Rushmore and all that. He says something very good in the movie. The character does, Ben Gates, and then screws it up. And I actually made a noise in the theater, and everybody looked at me when he said the right thing. He said that before the war between the states, he says the Civil War, it was United States are. Then since then, it became the United States is. And I'm like, yeah, all right. Someone gets it. Hollywood actually got something right. Then he says the Hamiltonian thing afterwards. And it wasn't until then that we were truly united. And this is what he's saying. No, we're not truly united unless you just get rid of state sovereignty. You get rid of the United States are, you make it the United States is, then we're truly united.
Yeah, united at the point of a bayonet.
Yeah.
It is against, and also you don't get to change the nature of the Constitution at the point of a bayonet. It requires an amendment. They didn't do that.
True enough.
It is against all the principles of a good government to vest the requisite powers in such a body as Congress. Two sovereignties cannot coexist within the same limits. Giving powers to Congress must eventuate in a bad government or a no government. The plan of New Jersey, therefore, will not do. What then is to be done? Here he was embarrassed. The extent of the country to be governed discouraged him. The expense of a general government was also formidable, unless there were such a diminution of expense on the side of state governments.
Now, do you understand what he just said here, folks? He's not only saying that we can't have the states anymore, we can't even have two houses of Congress. It'll just be too much confusion, too much fight. We just need one body controlling everything.
If they were extinguished, he was persuaded that great economy might be obtained by substituting a general government. He did not mean, however, to shock the public opinion by proposing such a measure. Once again, it's the argument, would people ever ratify it? And yes, he did.
Well, you got, and once again, see, he's arguing for the European way of doing things. America developed as colonies, as states, with their own personality, with their own culture, different, and it turned out to be very good. And the founding fathers generally recognized that allowing the states to handle local issues without central government interference was a good idea. He disagrees.
Yeah, he has no idea. It's a fundamental truth that the government only does two things well, and that's collect taxes and fight wars. Bigger government is always inefficient. Local decisions are always more beneficial to the local inhabitants.
Right.
That's what decentralization is all about. You only need a central government for basically to protect it.
Anything has to do with the union itself.
Yeah.
Disagreements between the members, trade with other countries and other international affairs, so on and so forth.
On the other hand, he saw no other necessity for declining it. They are not necessary for any of the great purposes of commerce, revenue, or agriculture. Subordinate authorities, he was aware, would be necessary. Now he's talking about a bureaucracy. There must be district tribunals corporations for local purposes.
He doesn't mean corporations as we think today, which was codified by the establishment of U.S. Steel back in the early 1900s. What he's talking about are smaller bodies that serve the larger central system.
But cui bono, who benefits? The vast and expensive apparatus now appertaining to the states. The only difficulty of a serious nature which occurred to him was that of drawing representatives from the extremes to the center of the community. What inducements can be offered that will suffice? The moderate wages for the first branch would only be a bait to little demagogues. $3 or thereabouts he supposed would be the utmost. The Senate, he feared from a similar cause, would be filled by certain undertakers who wish for particular offices under the government. This view of the subject almost led him to despair that a Republican government could be established over so great an extent. Talk about the geographical size and differences. He was sensible at the same time that it would be unwise to propose one of any other form. In his private opinion, he had no scruple in declaring, supported as he was by the opinions of so many of the wise and good, that the British government was the best in the world. Okay, just want to leave that one hanging there.
Love empire, doesn't he?
He sure does.
And mercantilism.
And that he doubted.
Part of it.
Yes, it is. And that he doubted much whether anything short of it would do in America.
And once again, he's saying we're in a world of empires. If we're gonna exist in a world of empires, we need to be an empire, and the best empire to emulate is the big one, the one we came from, Britain, and their mercantilism and their way of making sure that everybody's subjects and under control, because it makes sure that the subordinates behave.
Yeah, I think those two sentences really could have summed up his entire opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. He hoped gentlemen of different opinions would bear with him in this, and begged them to recollect the change of opinion on this subject which had taken place and was still going on. It was once thought that the power of Congress was amply sufficient to secure the end of their institution. The error was now seen by everyone. The members most tenacious of republicanism, he observed, were as loud as any in disclaiming against the vices of democracy. That's true. This progress of the public mind led him to anticipate the time when others as well as himself would join in the praise bestowed by Mr. Necker on the British Constitution, namely, that it is the only government in the world which unites public strength with individual security.
Boy, so it sounds like a warning by Franklin. Liberty, security. If you want willing to sacrifice one for the other, you deserve neither.
Yeah, that's why I always talk about, it's the whole political spectrum isn't right versus left. It's authoritarianism versus individual liberty. And the further you get to the left, the less individual liberty you have. We sacrifice just enough individual liberty to maintain order. And that is what their trust should be striving to do here at the convention.
Yeah, well, it's like I like to explain too, in a good system issues necessary laws. The problem is, as they grow, they get beyond necessary laws. They begin to then issue unnecessary laws. And when you run out of unnecessary laws, then the tyrannical laws kick in. And government's role is supposed to be as minimal as possible, only the necessary laws. But when you have people who call themselves lawmakers, well, they believe it's their job to keep issuing laws, no matter what they are or how tyrannical they may be. Continue, please.
In every community where industry is encouraged, there will be a division of it into the few and the many. Hence, separate interests will arise. There will be debtors and creditors. Give all power to the many, they will oppress the few. Give all power to the few, they will oppress the many. Both therefore ought to have power, that each may defend itself against the other. To the want of this check, we owe our paper money, installment laws. To the proper adjustment of it, the British owe the excellence of their constitution. Do the British have a constitution, Doug?
Not written.
Yeah.
They do. They considered what was understood by it, which was based on the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Rights. But the British Constitution was living and breathing and was established and based on the rulings of the courts. And that's what he loved. And that's what we've become. Anyway, go ahead.
Their House of Lords is a most noble institution. Having nothing.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sick myself. I'm sick of him on this one. Their House of Lords is. We're trying to get away from nobility here.
Not him.
Not him. Well, because remember, he believes that only an elite. The people are too dumb, and there's some truth to it, as the old quote from Winston Churchill goes: "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter." People do tend to be uninformed, but he's arguing that since the uninformed people can't be trusted, then their say must be eliminated. That only an elite can run a country. Only an elite group of individuals who are skilled in the science of politics can be trusted to run an empire. And it must be an empire because we're in a world of empires. That's his argument.
Having nothing to hope for by a change and a sufficient interest by means of their property, in being faithful to the national interests, they form a permanent barrier against every pernicious innovation, whether attempted on the part of,
That's okay.
Tempted on the part of the crown or of the commons. No temporary senate will have firmness enough to answer the purpose. The Senate of Maryland, which seems to be so much appealed
hang on a
to.
second. You see what he said? No temporary senate will be. Well, what's he saying?
House of Lords.
What is he also saying?
Permanent.
Lifetime appointments.
Mm-hmm.
That your legislators can't have short terms. That makes it a temporary legislature.
Yeah, which means there's no recourse if they do stuff you don't like.
But don't worry, they're skilled in the science of politics.
And of course, they're men of property, and they are always going to protect their property interests, which means that all the serfs that are on their property will be protected as well.
Yeah, see, so you may be a peasant, but you'll be protected.
Sacrificing liberty for safety. The Senate of Maryland, which seems to be so much appealed to, has not yet been sufficiently tried. Had the people been unanimous and eager in the late appeal to them on the subject of a paper emission, they would have yielded to their torrent. I don't recall what that Maryland Senate experiment was, but apparently Hamilton liked it. Or maybe he didn't, and he said, well, you guys think you have a good idea, but we haven't seen time go by long enough to see it fail. We'll have to go look that up. Their acquiescing in such an appeal of it is proof. Gentlemen differ in their opinions concerning the necessary checks from the different estimates they form of the human passions. They suppose 7 years a sufficient period to give the Senate an adequate firmness, from not duly considering the amazing violence and turbulence of the democratic spirit. 7 years is not long enough.
So he's rightly arguing against democracy. He's wrongly arguing against the limitations of holding office that democracy would offer. Once again, you've got your yin and your yang when it comes to democracy. There are pluses and there's minuses. And ultimately, what you want to do, you want to pull the pluses out of it and get rid of the minuses. So in other words, but what he wants to do is, as the old saying goes, throw the baby out with bathwater.
When a great object of government is pursued, which seizes the popular passions, they spread like wildfire and become irresistible. He appealed to the gentlemen from the New England states, whether experience had not there verified the remark. Shays' Rebellion again. As to the executive, it seemed to be admitted that no good one could be established on Republican principles. Was not giving up the merits of the question, for can there be a good government without a good executive? The English model.
Once again, he's essentially right, but he's heading towards something. Don't worry, you'll see the word. He's heading towards something that we fought a war against. Go ahead.
The English model was the only good one on this subject. The hereditary interest of the king, that's your word, was so interwoven with that of the nation, and its personal emoluments so great that he was placed above the danger of being corrupted from abroad, and at the same time was both sufficiently independent and sufficiently controlled to answer the purpose of the institution at home.
We don't want foreign influence. We don't want influence by the states. We just want a centralized government that takes care of business. But don't worry, because it's for his own country, he won't be corruptible.
Have we had any bad kings throughout history?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the weak sides of republics was their being liable to foreign influence and corruption. Men of little character, acquiring great power, become easily the tools of intermeddling neighbors. Sweden was a striking instance. The French and English each had their parties during the late Revolution, which was affected by the predominant influences of the former. What is the inference from all these observations? That we ought to go as far in order to attain stability and permanency as Republican principles will admit. Let one branch of the legislature hold their places for life, or at least during good behavior. Let the executive also be for life. Just let that hang there. Now, you know who the executive, I think everyone in the room knows that executive was going to be George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton was his aide-de-camp for 4 years during the war. He's got Hamilton's ear. I mean, he's got Washington's ear. So
Washington ascends to power, so does he.
Yes, yeah, Hamilton's, and it's actually what happened. He appealed to the feelings of the members present, whether a term of 7 years would induce the sacrifices of private affairs, which an acceptance of public trust would require, so as to ensure the services of the best citizens. Now he's talking about his bureaucracy. On this plan, we should have in the Senate a permanent will, a weighty interest, which would answer essential purposes. But this is a Republican government, it will be asked. Yes, if all the magistrates are appointed and vacancies are filled by the people or a process of election originating with the people. So we've got this royal dynasty, but as long as all the bureaucrats are appointed or elected, it's still a republic. It's got an interesting take on that. He was sensible that an executive constituted, as he proposed, would have in fact but little of the power and independence that might be necessary. On the other plan of appointing him for 7 years, he thought the executive ought to have but little power. He would be ambitious with the means of making creatures. And as when he says making creatures, I think he's talking about spoil system. Handing out favors, political favors. That's what he's saying. And as the object of his ambition would be to prolong his power, it is probable that in case of a war, he would avail himself of the emergence to evade or refuse the degradation from his place. Sort of like Vladimir Zelensky, no elections in Ukraine. That's what he's saying. If a president can be replaced every 7 years, he's going to do everything he can to stay in power.
Mm-hmm.
An executive for life has not this motive for forgetting his fidelity and will therefore be a safer depository of power.
He's not worried about whether or not he's reelected or the fact that his term is coming to an end. Therefore, he's not going to take actions to protect that.
It will be objected probably that such an executive will be an elected monarch. and will give birth to the tumults which characterize that form of government. He would reply that monarch is an indefinite term. It marks not either the degree or duration of power. If this executive magistrate would be a monarch for life, the other proposed by the report from the committee of the whole would be a monarch for 7 years. The circumstance.
Either way, you're getting a monarch, guys. Come on.
He doesn't believe in limited powers, I guess, or checks and balances.
Well, they haven't even gotten to the full understanding themselves yet in this convention of that.
Yeah. The circumstance of being elective was also applicable to both. It had been observed by judicious writers that elective monarchies would be the best, if they could be guarded against. The tumults excited by the ambition and intrigues of competitors. He was not sure that tumults were an inseparable evil. He rather thought this character of elected monarchies had been taken rather from particular cases than from general principles. The election of Roman emperors was made by the army, Praetorian Guard, actually. In Poland, the election is made by great rival princes with independent power and ample means of raising commotions. In the German Empire, the appointment is made by the electors and princes who have equal motives and means for exciting cabals and parties. Might such a mode of election be devised among ourselves as we will defend the community against these effects in any dangerous degree? Having made these observations, he would read to the committee a sketch of a plan which he should prefer to either of those under consideration. He was aware that it went beyond the ideas of most members. But will such a plan be adopted out of doors? Will the public listen to my plan? In return, he would ask, will the people adopt the other plan? At present, they will adopt neither. But he sees the union dissolving, or already dissolved. He sees evils operating in the states, which must soon cure the people of their fondness for democracies. Saying, look, things are so chaotic right now. All these people are screaming for liberty right now. Well, things are going to get worse, and you're going to be demanding a stronger central government to save us. That's exactly his argument. Save us from the chaos. Save us from the anarchy. That's pretty much the argument almost every tyrant in history has made, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He sees that a great well, yeah, this goes back to the original form of government back in the caveman. You know, one guy picks up a club and realizes, okay, I'm going to be in charge and I'll protect you. The rest of you go hunt and gather. That's what government has always been, a organized protection racket, and that's how Hamilton sees it. He sees that a great progress has been already made and is still going on in the public mind. He thinks, therefore, that the people will in time be unshackled from their prejudices, and whatever that happens, they will themselves not be satisfied at stopping where the plan of Mr. Randolph would place them, but be ready to go as far, at least, as he proposes. He did not mean to offer the paper he had sketched as a proposition to the committee. It was meant only to give a more correct view of his ideas and to suggest the amendments which he should probably propose if the plan of Mr. Randolph in the proper stages of its future discussion. He read his sketch of the words following. And I think we want to go down to F9. Okay. So that's Hamilton for today. Kind of gives it away, doesn't he?
It's exactly who he is. And when you read the Federalist Papers, you see he tones it down a little bit because he realizes he's got a bunch of anti-federalists in New York he has to convince accept the Constitution. But if you read it carefully, you see those bits still inserted here and there.
Yeah. And really, that's the real big dislike of Hamilton, because he goes to the convention and proposes one thing, realizes he's not going to get his way, but he is going to get a stronger central government, so he becomes a huge proponent of the Constitution as proposed.
Right.
And once
Well, it's a
it gets,
step in the right direction.
yeah, and then once he becomes the Treasury Secretary and has his cronies around him, they just simply ignored every argument he made in
Right.
the Federalist Papers and imposed what he wanted anyway. So he's duplicitous, and that's one of the major arguments against Hamilton. Is he wanted an elected monarch. He wanted the British government. He wanted an empire. Then he went out there and sold this thing to people and say, "Nah, it's not going to do that." The Anti-Federalists were afraid that we were going to create too strong of a federal government, and Hamilton was one of the major proponents of saying, "No, that's not going to happen. We put protections in place," and then he proceeds to ignore those protections.
And his deception on that with the Federalist Papers is very fascinating, because what you'll notice is in the beginning, John Jay and Hamilton are the only ones writing the Federalist Papers. And Hamilton realizes people ain't buying it. They're not, because, Hamilton has this reputation for being a big government guy. And so he says, "Hey, Mr. Madison, even though you're not a New Yorker, we need someone the people trust with sensibilities regarding a limited system. Can you help me with some of these Federalist Papers?" Madison obliged, but it wasn't. If you did not know who's writing the papers, it's not hard to tell the difference.
That's the whole thing. Is we talk about we talk about original intent. We mean the Constitution as ratified, as argued in Philadelphia, as argued in the Federalist Papers, as argued at the ratifying conventions. That's the Constitution we want.
Right.
Hamilton's version of the Constitution that he promised wouldn't happen is the stronger central government that's basically destroying our country as it is.
Yeah, we live in Hamilton's America today.
Yeah, Lincoln's too.
Now, that said, I was interviewed by Dr. Curry Myers a couple of weeks ago, and he says, "So we're in a post-constitutional era." And I said, "Not necessarily, but we're really close." The only reason we're not in a post-constitutional era right now is because we still have the Electoral College. We still have the states able to ratify amendments, and we still have a few other small mechanisms. But once those mechanisms are gone, and we're very close to it, they're arguing for packing the courts. They're arguing for getting rid of the Electoral College. They're arguing for the states to be nothing more than provinces like Hamilton did. When I say they, I mean the opponents of the Constitution. Once those things happen, we will be in a post-constitutional era. And this is the reason why this series is so important. We need to understand why the Constitution is so important to save and to get back to the principles of, because we're this close to losing all of it.
Yeah, and I think had Trump not won in 2016 and 2024, we might already be past it.
Yeah,
Hillary was certainly of the opposite opinion as us. And at the end of the day, we'll get through this in this series. As they discuss more and more why federalism is the only way to do it, and that's why we argue for states' rights. Hamilton just got done arguing for the opposite, and so that is the underlying reason. Fundamentally, I do not like Alexander Hamilton. But great show, Doug. You want to give a quick summation of where people can find you?
DouglasVGibbs.com. I just posted a new article yesterday. We're finally back on track with getting stuff out there. I'm going to try to post every day. We definitely got to get back to videos. I haven't done any videos in a while. I've got some other work that I'm doing. And if you want a whole list of my programs where you can just go there, find the list, find the shows, get the links, be it radio, podcast, or vidcast, just go to navigation2liberty.com, navigation, the number 2, liberty.com, at douglasvgibbs.com, or at navigation2liberty.com. There's also the opportunity for you to join the movement, to join my efforts. $9 a month. Click the join button on Navigation to Liberty, or the join link in the link bar in the top of the page, upper right. $9 a month will help continue to fund our efforts, which includes AM radio, podcasts, vidcasts, and a lot of other things. Also, real quick, on the 26th of October, I will be at the Vineyard Church in Fallbrook speaking. On the 27th, I will be at Buena Park's Independence Hall giving a tour and speaking. And then on the 28th, I will be the title sponsor of Pastor Appreciation Breakfast, with the main speaker being Reverend, or should I say Pastor Jack Gibbs. You can learn more about how to get there, to get your tickets, at kprz.org. kprz.com. So real quick, October 26th, 27th, 28th, I will be in Southern California. The list, the places, the times, navigation to liberty.com. Scroll down to where it says events, navigation, the number 2 liberty.com.
Very good. Doug and I will be in about an hour or so, a little over, where we'll be live on Zachy Radio, doing Re-Federalist Radio, where we look at current events from a constitutional standpoint. And then I am actually speaking in New Hampshire at the Independence Inn in front of a group of the Free State Project people. And I'll be talking about Reynolds v. Sims and what can be done to actually really just get us far back to this. One little effort, if it can be done, would get us close. Be the biggest step back to federalism we've had in 200 years. Doug and I are very much in agreement on that one. We have done shows on the subject. I do not think there will be a recording for that, but if you're in New Hampshire, go to the Independence Inn this Monday.
And for that show at 11 a.m. Pacific that he mentioned earlier, zackyradio.com, Zachy, Z-A-C-K-Y radio.com, 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 o'clock somewhere out east. At zackyradio.com, and Brady and I on Wednesdays are always together on that show, except for when I'm on the road.
Very good. Doug, thanks again for joining me. We'll get another Madison's and notes out as soon as we can, too.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Cheers.